in my bucket list, which I entered this item when I was 28 years old, I said I want to live to 125. And if you have purpose, then you need to find the route to the purpose. So I have a goal to live to 125. That means that I need to do certain things and not do certain things and be disciplined on the journey. So, I measure regularly my metabolic age, and my metabolic age this morning was 58 years old.
Jack Daly, it is an absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Paul, good to see you again. Just like you mentioned to me earlier before we got live, you were one of many in an audience, but nonetheless, I still remember you as one of the people who stood out.
Well, thank you for that. But yeah, so I got to tell you a little story, Jack, to kick this off. November 2023, I got an invite, a call to say, "Would you attend this?" It was an invite-only event in Dublin, and it was this American coming over to speak. You know, Americans, they talk a lot. You know, this guy was coming over to speak, but it was an invite-only event. No offense, invite-only event for entrepreneurs. And I got a call saying, "Would I come along to this?" So I said, yeah, sure, I'll come along. Who's the guy? Jack Daly. Never heard of him. That's okay. I'll come along. And I did look you up in advance of going, and because as I said, we said before the podcast started, a lot of motivational type speakers haven't, in my view, haven't ever run a business. I mean, they're talking about great stuff that they've actually learned but never done. And so I had a look at your bio. I thought, well, hold a sec, this guy has scaled and been CEO of he's built several businesses. He has built major sales teams. So this is a guy. So firstly, I realized a guy who knows exactly what he's doing. And I knew you'd then moved into the sales coaching, CEO coaching, motivation, and you'd been at a very, very long time. And the people in EO who would invite me to this event, they were kind of going, it's a privilege to get Jack Daly here. You got to come and see this guy. So that was all good. I arrived in. It was the 23rd of November, 2023. Got in there. It was 4 weeks away from Christmas. The city was very, very busy. I was going, do I want to go in? I went into the room. All good. I'm warm enough as an audience. And then you get up and you say this. You may not remember this, or maybe you say it all the time. You go, welcome everybody. I'm Jack Daly. I am going to speak for the next 4 hours. And I go, oh shit, 4 hours. And then you said, I'm not going to take a break. If you want to leave the room, take a call, use the bathroom. I'm not going to take a break. And I thought to myself, what have I let myself in for? So that was how warm I was to Jack Daly. All I can say is I brought my Remarkable. I don't know if you ever use a Remarkable tablet, a digital tablet, as opposed to a notepad. And I was delighted I had, because then you started speaking and my bias shifted and I started writing. And the wisdom, the experience, the knowledge, when the 4 hours over, if you had said, I did want to break, then I'm honest, but if you said, let's take 30 minutes, I'll do another 4 hours, I would have stayed. So if that intro is not enough for anyone listening to go, I got to listen to this guy, there's nothing more I can say.
So Paul, I would just edit one comment that you made, and that was that I spent 4 hours speaking. I probably spent 4 hours shouting, screaming, yelling, berating, like I can't stop the passion and energy that's bottled up inside of me, because I've lived it so many times, and I know what I'm talking about is so impactful to anybody that's running a business. Yeah.
And the passion so much came across, and neither of us, for our children, but as we talked before, you said you're a bit older than me. So that event was so inspirational. But I'm 60 this year, and I feel like I have the energy of a man of 35 or 40 years of age. I don't remember what that was, but that's what it feels like. I feel like I'm buzzing with energy. But to look ahead at someone who's a decade or so older than me and see the energy, enthusiasm, and passion you have for life, that's very motivational for me, because it feels like, hey, I'm only warming up.
Well, here, let's put it into some context. I turned 76 years old this month, And
Wow.
that's a marker for me because that means that 60% of my life is in the rearview mirror. Now, if you
Yeah.
do the math, what I just said is, well, that would mean that I'm going to live to 125. But in
I was
my
doing the math.
bucket list, which I entered this item when I was 28 years old, I said I want to live to 125. And
Mm.
if you have purpose, then you need to find the route to the purpose. So I have a goal to live to 125. That means that I need to do certain things and not do certain things and be disciplined on the journey. So,
Mm.
I measure regularly my metabolic age, and my metabolic age this morning was 58 years old. Uh,
So you're
so,
actually younger than me.
well, I'm not sure what your metabolic age might be, Paul, because you look like you're in pretty good shape. But it's not by accident. It's by intent. It's by purpose. It's been thought through. It's done with, hey, what disciplines do I need to put around me? What bumper guards do I need to have to make sure, right? So, as an example, if you were to come to my home, and I live in Southern California, and the invite is always there, I have a
Mm.
custom built that I designed wine cellar that holds 1,000 bottles. I am a wine enthusiast. If I don't put some bumper guards around me, then I could find myself drunk every night, type of thing, and that probably wouldn't facilitate me getting to 125, right? So if you went to one of my two websites, uh, what you would find is I post my goals for everybody to see. And I
Mm.
post my bucket list for everyone to see because that increases the accountability and puts a little bit more pressure on me. And you would see I have governors on me with regard to how much wine I'm allowed to drink and when I'm allowed to drink it and all of those types of things. And it's not that I don't like my wine, it's just that, hey, I have a bigger goal in mind, 125, and I'll raise a glass at 125.
Yeah, it's interesting when you put it that way. You can enjoy a glass of wine; it's there to be enjoyed, but you've something to aim for. And I reckon that very few people at 76 years are thinking that way. They're thinking they should be winding down, and there's no sign of you winding down.
uh, so on a sad note, Paul, my wife and I, Bonnie and I, met when I was 16 and she was 15. The sad note is that 7 years ago I lost her to cancer. And all of a sudden, I'm 68 years old at the time, going, when what do I do with the rest of my life here? And am I going to be by myself? And my kids had already left home, and so forth. And all of a sudden, on August 18th, 2019, I was out to dinner with a client, and we kissed, and we've been kissing ever since. And her name is Karen. And so we now have,
And she was
you
in
know,
Dublin. She was in Dublin that evening.
yeah, and so we're now into our sixth year together, and it's fantastic. And I don't put the 52 years that Bonnie and I had together, I don't put that in a negative tone. But what I do say on a regular, ongoing basis is, oh my God, the best years of my life are ahead of me. Uh,
Mm.
and there's so many things that I want to do. I want to share some of the experiences in the world and life that I've enjoyed that I put as high marks with Karen now, even
Mm.
if I've gone before. So Machu Picchu, for example, was a place that moved me in a significant way. So I said to Karen, listen, neither one of us are spring chickens, and the only way to do Machu Picchu, in my mind, is to hike it in, not take the bus. So
Yeah.
you're going to need to train. And so 8 months of training on her part to be able to take that on. And then when we got there, the big mountain inside Machu Picchu is called Huayna Picchu, and you could actually climb that. They limit it to 400 people a day. So we got passes for that. And I said, you did the hike. The Huayna Picchu will be a piece of cake. I thought our relationship was going to end on the mountain uh, because it was such a strenuous deal. But when she came back down, she just embraced me and said, "You're pushing me to do things that are so amazing. You're taking my life to another level." That is so joyful for me.
It's really interesting that you should share that story, because in Dublin you also shared the story about Bonnie, and you told your childhood sweethearts, and it was on my mind before you spoke about it. It was on my mind because I also married my childhood sweetheart. I was 15 and she was 14 when we met. We didn't get married until our early 20s, but we together now, if we're careful here, maybe 44 years or something, married 35, together a very, very long time. So, and I also would consider myself a very upbeat, enthusiastic person, but I do wonder sometime, I do wonder when I heard your story is, I mean, thankfully my wife is still alive and well, but I wonder how you face a huge, I wonder how I would face a huge
Mm.
tragedy like that. And if after it, I would no longer be the upbeat, enthusiastic person. I could imagine, and I'm sure for so many people, a tragedy like that, you lose the love of your life. I know it must have been a horrendous event. How have you returned? Because 7 years, I would say, is a relatively short period of time. How, how have you returned? You know, how do you still find yourself after that?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that I had a what I consider to be a blessed advantage. Um, so neither one of these choices are very good, Paul. But I'm going to only give you two. One is that that a policeman knocks on your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you answer it, and he says, "Your wife unfortunately was killed in an accident tonight."
Mm,
The other choice is that in February um, of any particular year, you're told your wife has stage 4 pancreatic cancer and probably won't make it through the end of the year.
mm,
And Bonnie, in February of 2017, was given that diagnosis and passed away on November 11th in 2017. Do the math, and I had 9 months to spend time with her. And I stopped my touring and my speaking, and we had 9 months to regale about all this incredible life that we shared together. Tons of photo albums going through all of that. But here's the real nugget. Bonnie turned to me and she said, because we had the time, she
mm.
said, "Look, when I'm gone, I don't want you to be the guy that's shriveling in the corner, crying, weeping, and woe is me. You are full of life. And I didn't marry the guy that shrivels in the corner. So
Yeah.
when I'm gone, I expect you to like bring game and just keep at it in a major way. Go out and live life big." And then she said, "And if you don't, I will haunt you." And so she gave me the freedom. Now, that being said, I will tell you that the first year to 15 months was very difficult for me.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
the most difficult part for me, Paul, was um, being home. Uh, as a traveling speaker and as a traveling CEO, hotel rooms are pretty normal for me. And an empty seat or no one that I know sitting next to me on a plane is sort of normal, right?
Mm.
Uh, and so my new normal was go be in a hotel, be in a hotel more than you've ever been in a hotel, because when you come home, no one's here. And it
Mm.
was strange and it was eerie and it was sad and
Mm.
and am I supposed to stay in this home, and how long, and what like uh and so we just booked me to travel the world for about a year. And somewhere around the 15th month I sorted myself out and said, "You know what, you live a pretty good life, yeah, albeit it's not with Bonnie, but hey, make the best of it and let's go have some fun."
Mm.
And then 2 or 3, 4 months later, all of a sudden that magical kiss took place, and then off we were, off and running. And and of all things, Karen and Bonnie and I were friends, and so we used to go to dinner together and that type of thing. So, um, yeah,
I mean,
I'm a blessed guy.
one part of me is thinking you were blessed to meet Karen, but the other part of it really is that if you weren't in that state of mind, it wouldn't have happened. If you had remained Karen would have been there, but if you had remained the shriveled guy in the corner, it never would have happened.
Yeah, yeah. So you know what? Look, it's a bit of how I think I approach life. Um, when the pandemic hit and everybody, the world went into lockdown, I was respectful of other people with masks and things like that, but I wasn't all in on it. And I traveled still during that pandemic period of time. I lived my life in a very full way. And what's really unique, and most people are not aware of this, but in April of 2020, the first month, full month of lockdown, I was diagnosed with stage 3 malignant melanoma and had to go in and have top of my head removed. And then 8 months later, it came back on my neck, and I had to do 54 weeks of cancer treatment in a cancer facility. Uh, and so age, I was an old guy, and two, I was impaired with this cancer. Of all people that should have been shriveled up, afraid of the pandemic, I took it on and embraced it and said, you can do what you can do, and then the rest is left up to the nature, right? And so, gosh, Karen and I have a photo album of the first year of the pandemic, and it sits in our family room for people to go through it, and they're like, "You did all this during the pandemic?" It's just an outlook on life. It's just different than most.
I think it feeds very much back, and I have your book on the shelf here, Jack Daly's Life by Design, which I love. But I think it really feeds back to the concept in the book, because when you look at all of these very difficult personal challenges that you face, I think to myself that in those moments, all you can do is go, well, whatever life I've had, I have squeezed, like I have lived an amazing life. So I think even with Bonnie's passing, you're able to go, but we had an amazing life together.
Yeah.
So how awful would it be to go, oh, we should have. Why didn't we do this? Or, and even when you had the cancer diagnosis, if you're going, oh, I knew I should have. And I guess that those words never pass your lips that I wish I should have, because if it's something you want to do, you've made a plan to do it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and thanks for mentioning the book. That book is my most recent book, but the previous nine were all in the business
Yeah, yeah.
genre, right? How to grow your business, how to grow your revenues, and how to have a winning culture. But Life by Design for me, and my publisher said, you're going to impact more people's lives positively with this book than any of her previous. But inside the book, one of the things that I mention is this, that when Bonnie and I got married, which was in our early 20s, like you, um, we had a lot of conversation about the houses we each individually grew up in. And one of the things that we found was that her parents and my parents were actually having the same conversation. And the conversation sounded like this: when we retire, we're going to do A, B, and C. When we retire, we're going to do one, two, and three. Uh, both of our dads passed away around the age of 50. So all of that we're going to do never happened. And I said in my 20s, we're going to build a life list, which I now call a bucket list as a result of the movie. I thought it was a sexier name. But we're going to build a life list, and we're going to make a list of all the things that we want to do before we're too old to be able to do it. And that's where it started. And that list today is over 400 items, and over 80% of them are complete. And I just love checking the boxes.
Well, clearly, with your climb of Machu Picchu, you're not getting anywhere close to being too old to do it. But the other book I have here on my desk is the Hyper Sales Growth book. And interestingly, when I picked both of those up, um, and I don't know if it's my age or my outlook, but the one that appealed to me most was the life by design. And then, as I said, I took copious notes in Dublin that evening in November the 24th, and I looked back on them this afternoon, the pages and pages of notes, and I realized they came in under a few themes. And I suppose when you're listening to any speaker, you pick up what's important to you. And the few things I wrote down where I wrote down about this, the concept of designing your life. Now, that's something I'm really in favor of. I am an amateur compared to what you've done, but I do have a life plan and I have a book, and it's a 70-page book. And so I have put a lot of thought into planning my life. So maybe that's why I realized you were streets ahead of me. You're thinking of it, so I had a lot to learn. But the things I wrote down that you talked about many things, but the things I wrote down, and I'm going to put them in the order I felt they were important, was designing your life, and then because that room was full of CEOs and entrepreneurs, was having a growth mindset. Then I wrote down creating the right culture in your business, and I loved what you said about that. And then the things a CEO should focus on. And the reason I've put them in that order is, for me, I'm not saying you spoke about them in that order,
Yeah.
but for me it was, that's the order they need to be in. I mean, I need to figure out who am I, what's my life about. Then I need to have a growth mindset which says, well, I can do those things. Then I need the culture in my business that doesn't require me to be there 80 hours a week. And then I need to understand, now remaining as a CEO, what are the things I would love to do. So for someone listening who maybe hasn't heard you speak before, is not familiar with these concepts, how does that as a kind of a structure, would you think of them in that order?
It's almost like an attorney leading the witness here. Uh, so it's not that I wouldn't push you back, but I do think you have the right order. Um, Listen, my first sales job was I was 7 years old. I couldn't even understand why kids were playing hide and
Selling
seek.
newspapers, wasn't
I could, no, that didn't happen till 12. At 7, I
right?
was making potholders and selling them to moms and grandmoms. But
That's
but but whether it's 7 years old or 12 years old, I mean, like between 26 and 46 years old, I built 6 businesses as an adult into national platforms in the U.S. Uh, I absolutely loved doing that. I hated going to bed at night, and I couldn't wait to get up in the morning. That's what it was all about to me. Uh, but that all being said, and I hope that I'm conveying how charged up I was about building my businesses. Uh, I always said that the reason that I'm doing this is to create the fuel to enable me to have a life that has no restrictions when it comes to, I want to do this. Um,
Mm.
that means that I'm going to build businesses that afford me the time to do this, that affords me the money to do this, that affords me the health to do this. And this being living life, living it big. So let me give you a great example. Uh, I did a marathon in all 50 states and all 7 continents. And people go, "Wow, Antarctica!" And I go, "Yeah, that was disappointing. It wasn't as cold and snowy as I had envisioned it." So the following year, my buddy and I went to the polar circle in the North Pole. Um, it was ice based. It was 20 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. There were 20 mile per hour winds. And the first 10K was snow to the knees. There were a maximum of 200 runners because there's no lodging in Greenland to afford to us. So I slept at the airport terminal. Um, and people would say, when you're out there, and I was out there at 68 years old, when you're out there, what are you thinking? And the question was really in the context of you must have been thinking how awful it was, how painful it was, how cold it was, and all I could think of was gratefulness. Grateful
Mm.
to be able to have the time, the money, and the health to be actually doing this damn thing, right? Uh, and so, what is it in life that we could do? Look, you and I both have seen this, the number of people that have had quote unquote success in building their businesses, but their relationship with their spouse or their kids is awkward at best, or that their health is in a shambles. How many people do I encounter that are your age, which is 16 years younger than me, that couldn't even begin to do an hour of what I'm doing, 6, 7,
Mm.
8 hours. Yesterday was a 14-hour day for me, and I didn't want it to stop, right? And that includes massive amounts of exercise, and I do CEO coaching. I had 3 CEO coach calls that went for an hour and a half each. I had an hour prep on each one of them. I had a half hour debrief on my note taking on them. Uh, and bring it. Just let's do some more. And I talked to a prospective partner yesterday on writing a new Jack Daly's Life by Design book for young adults, because I don't think that they're getting it at home or in school or in any other format. And I've had some adults that have taken the book and given it to their kids, and the kids have written me back and said, I know it wasn't written for a kid, but man, you've inspired me, and I've got some goals and so forth. Gosh, well, let's go write one for the young adults. Yeah. So all of that, and thank you for letting me run on here, but all of that is happening with this 76-year-old guy, right? My daughter's 53. I don't even think of myself as 53.
Well, many years ago, I took my AC/DC, the rock band, if you know them,
Yeah.
came to Dublin, and I took my son. He's 25 now, so he was maybe 18, 17 at the time. And so they were here recently. I took all my sons, but he was the only one in the country at the time. So we went to see him. He'd never been into an arena and seen anything like this before. So it was incredible. And if your first arena gig is AC/DC, you are in for a treat. So this was an incredible experience. But the guys came on stage, and they're all in their 70s, and they're rocking it. And I said to him, Jeff is his name. I said, Jeff, when you're thinking ahead to your 70s, I said, think of these guys. Think of rocking it to 80,000 people. I said, do not be thinking of slippers and a pipe, because it's and that's so I do think you're an inspiration now. But interestingly, I have 3 adult sons. None of them live here anymore. But I was moving some furniture around because we've remembered a family coming to stay for a few days. And so I moved stuff into that son's room. And as I was moving the stuff, I opened a drawer and your book fell out. Because
Ah!
when I bought, so when I unopened, I imagine. So when I no offense to Jack Daly, but when I got the book, I thought I've got to get a copy for each of my sons. Actually, it was difficult to do. Getting that into Ireland was almost impossible to get them. I have a son living in London. I ordered them and I shipped them to his house in London. And when I was over there 3 or 4 weeks later, I brought them back. So it wasn't easy. So I've got a copy for each of my sons, and it's sitting on his desk, and he doesn't even live here now. But the thing is, when I do that and I try and influence anyone, my job is to put that in front of them. And I never worry about the fact that he hasn't opened it, because he spent his whole life living with his old man who'll be all on about these things. And I'm going, at some stage, he will come back for a night or something, or he'll get to a point of going, hold a sec, what was life? But what was that book? And I'll go, it's on your bookshelf. So I don't force it, but part of me goes, the younger, I mean, you were very, very young when you were very clear there were 4 things you wanted to do in your life. It seems like it's no wonder then that you ended up with the life you've lived, because you set out to live that life.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned four things in my life at an early age. Uh, that came out on the golf course. And so I'm the oldest of five kids, and we weren't rich by any stretch. We would be in the poor category. My brother is 3 years younger than I am. I don't think he ever had clothes bought for him. He just got my hand me downs. That's the type of house. And by the time I hit 13, I had this newspaper route that I had five employees delivering the papers while I was increasing the circulation. So I had time on my hands, and I became a caddy at the country club. And it was amazing to me in the first week because people that were younger than both of us that should have been working were playing golf on Wednesday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and they were driving nice cars and living in nice homes. And that was not my dad's life. And I just said, gosh, if I could have a choice, I'd rather live theirs than his. And he's not going to be able to tell me how to do that because he hasn't figured it out. So
Yeah.
I just need to ask these guys. And so I would just pepper them with questions all the way around the round. And I just did that with about 50 members. And I kept hearing these continuous themes. And the biggest theme that I got was you have to have goals. And if they're not in writing, they don't count. Don't pick too many. Pick some date or some sign that they're done, and then share them with as many people as possible to increase the pressure, increase the accountability. And so that's where I came up with the four goals. I always laugh now because I said, I'm going to get all four of these done. Remember, I was 13. I'm going to get all four of these done when I'm old, like 30. Uh, I'm, I'm going to, here's where I want to be financially at 30. Here's where I want to be professionally at 30. Here's what my family I want to look like at 30. And here's what I'm going to look like education wise. And I had my true north. I had my destination. Stephen Covey said it better than anyone: begin with the end in mind. And so once I had where I wanted to be, then it was much easier to map it out. When I sit and travel so frequently, they've got the map apps in here, and it already knows where I am. Uh, and so, what I have to do in order for them to tell me how to get there is tell me the destination. But here's the thing, Paul: if I get in front of an audience of 100 people and say, by a show of hands, how many would like to be more successful than you are right now, every hand is up, and maybe some guys have two. And if I leave the stage and go and with a mic and say, share with the group what success is, it's crickets. They don't know. Now, if you
Yeah.
don't know, how did you use your time yesterday, last week, last month? Worse, how are you going to use your time today, tomorrow, next week, next month? Uh, and so the very first starting point is, what is it that you want your life to be? We get to design it.
We get to design it, but that seems to be a notion that is maybe obvious now to you and I. Um, I was in my teens. My father ran a small business, and he got introduced to a thing at the time called the Silva method of mind control. They changed the name because mind control is not a good name. But a guy called Jose Silva, very early in the world of personal development, and my father paid for me to go on that weekend when I was 18 years of age. Something I couldn't afford to do it myself. So I was opened up to this idea that we could begin to create the life we wanted, and we could visualize and all of these things. To some degree, that's what happened to you on the golf course. Living at home, you had a perception of how the world was, and suddenly you realize, oops, there's a different life. So maybe it's just, maybe people need to be put into a different environment where their beliefs, because after speaking to those 50 people, if your parents or family are going, no, Jack, you can't do that, you go, but that doesn't make sense because I've 50 examples of people who've done that. So my brain now, my logical brain now knows this is possible. My only one question is, how do you do it?
Yeah, so here you just made an open gateway into your notes of your four takeaways from that presentation, and one of them was having a growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
And um, look, here's a great example. On my bucket list was to do an Ironman. That's a 2.4 mile swim on the clock, followed by a 112-mile bike on the clock, followed by a 26.2-mile run on the clock. And I call it a long day at the office. And you need to finish that race in under 17 hours, and there's cutoff points on all three
Mm.
legs. I put that on my list a long time ago, but when I was running my companies and I had my kids at home, I just couldn't afford the training time, and so I said, look, we'll just park that on the bucket list, and when the kids are gone and I don't have employees, I can then revisit that. 58 years old is when I decided I'm going to do an Ironman. And my friends with a fixed mindset, not a growth mindset, my friends said, "Well, you can't do an Ironman. You're too old. You're like 58 years old. Like those days have passed, Jack." And I'm going, "No, there are people that are doing it in their 60s. There's a few in their 70s. I mean, it's possible. But if you really wanted to tell me why I couldn't do it, you could tell me, well, it's because you don't know how to swim. Because at 58 years old, Paul, I did not know how to swim. But but a growth mindset says figure it out, right? So if the goal is whatever the goal is, if the goal was do an Ironman and I need to figure out how to swim, well, go find somebody to teach me, hire a coach, follow the systems, and practice. And voila, I went on in the next 8 years to do 15 full Ironmans and a whole ton of halves. Uh, and actually was on the podium for several. For a guy that didn't start until he was 58 and didn't know how to swim. So that's a mindset, right? A mindset is in lockdown or during the pandemic. Well, the speaking business is dead because you can't travel and people can't get together. Well, I brought a crew into my house and said, build a virtual studio. And we built a virtual studio. And actually, because I didn't have to sleep in hotels all the time, I actually doubled my revenue during the pandemic as a professional speaker and set a Guinness World Record for the largest virtual presentation in business of 21,261 people. For me, that's reflective of a growth mindset. It's all about figure it out, whatever obstacle or challenge that you have. So, during my cancer battle, which went almost 4 years, I put on about 20 pounds, and it has to do with the drug, and it had to do with the inability to push yourself physically at the level that you once were. I had to stop racing, all kinds of different things, and I wasn't happy in the clothes that I was wearing. And you had an option. You could either figure out how to get back into shape, or you could figure out how to buy the next size up. And I hired a nutritionist, and I can tell you in 8 months now, I have lost over 35 pounds of body fat, and I've added over 15 pounds of muscle for a net loss of about 20 pounds. And I'm way more fit than I was 11 months ago, 10 months ago. And it's I found the coach, was taught the process, and disciplined enough to follow the process. And this is a guy that is 76 years old. So in that age bracket, I have put on muscle and tone, and I'm moving towards an actual six pack. Who would have thunk it?
You
Who
have a
would
modeling career coming up. But
have?
if the speaking fails for you, it's a possibility. The, the common thread I'm hearing here, and I hope people are picking up on this. And it started on the golf course, is the awareness that you want to achieve something, and then it's the same with it's the same with almost everything you've done. You go, I want to achieve something, and then the next realization is, I'm probably not the first person on the planet to have ever done this. There's probably someone else who's running an Ironman. I'm just guessing. There's probably yeah, there's probably someone who knows more about diet and exercise than me. There's probably someone who's built businesses, and so do I want to spend the next? I mean, Tony Robbins says success leaves clues. So do I now want to spend the next 20 years figuring out, or do I want to go, he knows how to do this? Why don't I get him to coach me? And then because that's kind of what happened to you in the golf course. You began, without realizing it, maybe as a child, you began asking all these questions. So it's not as if you had this plan for a magical life and just it fell into it. You actually went out and said, well, who's done this before? Who can show me how to do this? I can't swim. Do I jump in the pool and flap about, or do I find someone who can teach me? But a lot of people are averse to hiring coaches. But that's the pattern that's coming out. You go, problem. Who can help me solve this problem?
Absolutely. Get your ego out of the way.
Yeah,
And the phrase I use is model the masters. Find people that
yeah,
have already figured things out and ask them. Look,
yeah.
how many times in my career have I been asked by speakers, uh, how do you find the time to write a book? Because for a lot of professional speakers, if they have a book, they have the ability to increase the frequency on which they're going to be hired, and they can garner a higher fee. And that's in addition to whatever they would generate in revenue from book sales, right?
Mm,
Uh, and what I hear is, I'm so busy, I can't find the time to write the book. And, my response is, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So you mentioned hyper sales growth earlier, and that book went on to incredible success. 10 years ago, it was the number one bestseller on Amazon in 7 countries first week of publication, and just went on and on and on. But if you pick it up, it's 200 pages, and it's 15 pages a chapter, and there's 15 chapters, and it's big print, and so it's, well, could you write one chapter a week? Like, could you get 15 pages out of you per week? And
mm,
if you did that for 15 weeks, that's 4 months. You'd have your first draft, and within 6 months, you'd have your book published.
mm,
So, how bad do you want it? And put yourself under the gun to do that. Uh, and so could I have imagined 20 years ago me sitting here without a book 20 years ago, now saying I've had 10 books that I've published? Um, and it's no. But I don't have any more hours than you or anyone else. It's no different, Paul, than this. The number of people that look at me sometimes like I'm a freak when I say, well, I made my life goals through the age of 30 at 13 after interviewing these people on the golf course, and they're looking at me like, what a weird guy. What would prompt you to do that? And in my head, I'm sitting going, why wouldn't everybody see that? Like, isn't it obvious? I'm living in a house with 7 people and one toilet. My siblings are living in the same bedroom together. We're doing hand me down clothes, and we hardly see our dad because he's working 6 days a week. Um, and these guys are out playing golf during the week and driving nice cars. Uh, Hello, how did that
yeah.
happen? Right? Uh, Now, you got to break out of your timidity. You can't be timid and say, well, I don't want to ask the question. You do have to step up, but the prize is so grand, right? Uh, I I started with this nutritionist this past year. I now have over 30 clients that are engaged with her.
Mm.
And they're just looking at me, and they talk to me through a Zoom or something twice a month, and they're watching the transformation, and they're going,
They go,
how hard is it? And I'm going, oh, it's so easy. Like, it's just not difficult. Let me introduce you to Yvonne. And boom, off they go. Uh, so, whatever it is that you want to do in life, go find some people that have figured out the journey. You're absolutely right.
absolutely. But without a mindset that says you can do that, and maybe where most people are stuck is they never actually sit down and figure out what they really want in life. And if you never figured that out, well, like everything else we've said is kind of pointless, because you have to start, well, what's the life I really want to live? And just to realize just how precious your life is, just how precious your time is. We will all reach an end stage of that life, and I hope it's 125 for you. But you will reach that end stage, and sometimes when I think of that, I go, "What's it all about?" And I go, "Well, I can't figure that out, so let's not try." But the only question is, when I'm there, will I look back and have lived life well? I'm thinking of entrepreneurs listening to this, and the biggest challenge for most entrepreneurs that I know is time. And they may, and a lot of them certainly have growth mindsets, and they'll go, yeah, this idea of designing my life and planning my life makes sense. Where I know this is a big conversation, so I know we don't have a lot of time, but just to give some people an idea, who's someone who's completely engrossed in their business, who knows they're not allowing time for their spouse, their family, their health, their well-being. When someone is that swamped in that business, I've been that guy. I'm sure at some stage in your life you were that guy as well. When you're that swamped in your business, you're going, I would love to do what Jack's doing. I would love to create that life. Where does someone listening to this start to move the dial in the right direction?
Um, so you've had the benefit of sitting in the room with me for a few hours when I spoke. A big number for me. If I were a
You
guy
said a
that was
few
going
hours.
to,
It wasn't a few hours, Jack.
if
It
I
was 4 hours.
if I were a guy that was into tattoos, I'd tattoo 168 as the number on me,
Yes. Yeah.
because 168 is how we are equal. We all start the week with the same number of hours, and that's just math. 24 hours a day times 7 days. Um, so there isn't anybody that has more of an advantage when it comes to time. We're all given the same quantity. So, how are some people getting it done and others not? And that really comes down to two words, and those are priorities and discipline. And you need to know what your priorities are and then be disciplined enough to make those indeed the real priorities. So, watch this. I will stand in front of an audience when I'm talking about life by design and say, how many here have children? And damn near every hand is up. And I go, okay. Now, if I had the luxury of interviewing your kids, no matter what age they're at, single digit, double digit, whatever, um, I know that most of them would tell me they love you and want you around for a long time. And I bet if I said, where do your kids rank in terms of your importance in life, you would rank them very high. But now, if I look behaviorally at how you've just spent your last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, that's not reflective of what we're communicating right now. So for me, the discipline is I'm very calendar oriented. You and I had a specific time allotted here today. And by the way, your hand went up quite a while ago saying, I'd like to do this with Jack. And it took us a while to find that hour
Ab-
on the calendar
Absolutely.
because things are just boxed in and it is a very rigorous, disciplined life. And uh, I load in family, Karen, kids, personal life. health, all of those are appointments I make that are not appointments that I can just scratch because my business would benefit from me being available. Uh, I say whatever's left is what I can allocate to the business. Now I need to figure it out and get other people in the firm to step up and handle the things that need to be done on a day-to-day basis in the company. And for any entrepreneur that's telling me, well, this guy's living in a fantasy land, I'm just going to call bullshit on them, because I did it with 6 companies independent of one another as a startup with me and a blank sheet of paper as the start. And they scaled to as high as 2,600 salespeople. But in the 2,600 salespeople organization, I was the same guy with the loving relationship with Bonnie and with my kids and all of those types of things. But for example, hey, I really like to golf. And Paul, today I'll golf 100 rounds a year. Living in Southern California, the weather really benefits that. But when I had my kids at home, I put my golf clubs away because I had the business. And remember, I couldn't do the Ironman because of the training, because I had the kids and I had the business. So there's trade offs, but it isn't, the trade off is not all work and everything else is gone, because my health is a non negotiable. We get on the airplane, no matter what airline it is, before it takes off, there's a flight attendant saying, if that mask falls out of the ceiling and you're traveling with kids, put yours on first. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of them. So health becomes high priority for me. And then family and friends become high priority. And all of a sudden, now you're making, now you've got some things like, well, I can't do the Ironman, but I could run a marathon. That's not as onerous as travel and training, rather. So, you can't do it all. I get it. And there's trade offs, but make the trade offs with intentionality. Like, really sit down and prioritize. So the book, Jack Daly's Life by Design, provides the reader with blank forms to fill. And by the way, if you have difficulty getting the book, just go to the website, because you can download half the book with all the templates filled out and blank, and you can take yourself through the process. I just last week had a client in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who saw me speak twice in 2 days. The first day was 4 hours on business. The second day was 4 hours on Life by Design. He called us up and said, well, the next time Jackson, Philly, when is that? I want him to do a 8-hour workshop with my 80 top business managers on Life by Design. And when I talked to him, I said, I can always put 2 or 3 hours of business in there if you want. And he goes, no, I just want Life by Design. I want my people to live a magical life like you talked about. And I want you to show them how to do that. Because if I create an environment, a culture where my employees are happy in their life, they'll work and do what we need to do in the business. What a magical guy. Oh, and I got to tell you this. This is really so cool, Paul. I asked the guy what his business was, and he said, well, when I was 12 years old, and mentally I'm going, why is the guy taking me to when he was 12 years old? I just want to know what his business is. And he goes, when I was 12 years old, I wanted to make some money in the neighborhood, so I started cutting lawns. And today that business does about 70 million a year with 350 employees, and we cut lawns. And all he's doing is growing his business by taking care of his employees and giving them a life of intentionality. Wow.
It's amazing, and I think the most important thing I'm taking away from that is just to be intentional with your time. I accept the fact there will be people listening to this and going, I just don't have the time. You said no, you have 168 hours. That's it. Don't pretend you've less or more, because that's what you have. The problem is you're probably not using them with intention, and you're probably not putting your priorities in order. But I also like the fact that, because I mean, my sons, your children are adults, my children are adults, and I think, if I go back when my sons were living in the house and I had a family to take care of, my priorities had to be different. because you can't do everything, but you can do it at some stage. But I think the thing is, we've alluded to, is that business owners are often prioritizing their business. They value their family really highly, but when you look at their diary, they're prioritizing their business. And it certainly doesn't lead them to the life that you've lived. Jack, I know how important your time is to you, so I want to be really respectful of your time. It's been a privilege and an honor to have you on the podcast. I have no doubt that anyone that has stayed with us the whole way through will realize just the amount of wisdom is there. I want to congratulate you on the life you've lived, because to me, and I think to anyone listening, you're an absolute inspiration, and it certainly gives me encouragement of what the next 20, 30, 40 years hold for me.
Hey,
So I
Paul,
want to thank you for that.
before you say goodbye to me, I'm looking at the books
I have all
behind
the
me.
time in the world, Jack. I'm conscious of your time.
So there, I'm looking at your bookcase filled up that behind you, and I
Yeah,
am a voracious reader as well. But when we
yeah,
talk about time, one of the things I want to point out to people is this: it's that whole moniker of "figure it out." Uh, I have been a reader since remember reading as a little tyke, right? My bucket list had that I wanted to read 50 books in a year, and I just wasn't being able to crack the code.
yeah.
But in the last 3 years, I've gone over 100 books each year. So what took place there? Did I find more time? No, but I went from the normal paper type book, right, right,
Mm,
up
yeah,
to Kindle, but now
mm,
I've moved from Kindle to audio, and
yeah,
the audio gives me the ability. A lot of the speakers on the books are too slow, and you can amp it up in terms of. So I'm typically 1.5 on the audio meter. Um, and when I'm working out in the gym doing my weights, I've got my book in. When I'm riding in the car, I have my book in. When I'm running, I have my book in. When I'm on the plane, I have my book in. And and so I'm double dipping on my 168. I'm
mm,
getting the
mm.
exercise in, I'm getting the travel in, I'm getting the learning in. And I am a lifelong learner. And it is like I can't underscore how incredible it is to be able to leverage technology in getting some of your time back. Because I think of Audible as a technology play. Yeah.
Audible is a game changer. I find that as well. Driving, I mean, I was in a flight yesterday, the day before, and I made sure that for the 3 hours on the plane, I had something to listen to, and it's such a great way of using your time. Almost everyone I speak to who is successful is obsessed with learning, and certainly something I'm obsessed with learning, and it's one of the things I love to do in the podcast is pursue my obsessions, pursue my interests, drop them into a podcast where I get to speak to someone, and then hopefully someone who's snowed down in their business, even if they just listen to this, go home, by the time they get home, they go, hold a sec. Maybe, well, two things I would like them to think. Maybe I could do something, maybe I could do it differently. And second is, I don't have to figure this out. There's someone who's done all this before. So as you said, they can buy the book, they can go to your website, Jack Daly Life by Design, and they can download the template, so they don't have to figure out what probably took you decades to figure
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
They can jump the queue. I would really, you know, if from this conversation, if one or two people just did that and began to plan their lives. A friend of mine many years ago, out on a cycle together, and she said to me, Paul, you get everything you want, which is completely not true. I don't. I'm human like anyone else, and I do not get everything I want, but I think about everything I want. I know what I want, and I make an effort to get it. So it looks like that. It's not true, but it looks like that. But if you're not deciding what you want and not making an effort, how are you ever going to get there?
That's right. That's right. Well, listen, you're doing great things with the podcast, and I'll tell you, I'll set a lower bar than you, if one or two people were to make it through this podcast and arrived home listening to it in their car and walked in the house, and the only thing they did was hug their kids
Oh
and
my
spend
gosh.
some quality time with them, just that one night, we just did something really cool.
Yeah. Well, I think we just did something really cool anyway. So, Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks.